Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Town and Gown affiliates of UCLA. The affiliates acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. My name is Patty Schned, and I'm honored to serve as the president for Town and Gown affiliates. And we thank you all for your support. As our Safer at Home guidelines maintains, we think it's important that we continue with our programming to keep our tradition as a cultural bridge to and from the community adjoining the university. If you're interested in becoming a member of Town and Gown, UCLA's oldest Town and Gown organization, we welcome you. And membership forms will be available, and I think Justin can send them out to people after the event. This will include all virtual programming and hopefully in-person programming for the academic year. Again, thank you for coming, and I'll turn it back to Justin.
Sorry, I'm trying to find Robin. There you are. I think you're on mute.
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry we didn't get to all of you and to hear about your travel plans, but we have a very tight program with lots of information to share. So let me just move on with that. I'm going to pull up our bios here, and I'm going to say, let's see. I hope you all enjoy getting to meet some fellow Bruins and sharing travel plans for the upcoming summer. After spending over a year hunkering in place, I'm sure you're all eager to get out on the road for a change in scenery and to do it safely. As I said before, I'm Robin Phillips, VP of Programs, and I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speakers. With us today as moderator is Crystal Aragon, Director of Travel for the UCLA Alumni Association. She strongly believes in lifelong learning through travel and includes UCLA faculty on more than 50% of the tours. She has served on the Educational Travel Community Executive Advisory Council and is considered a leader in the nonprofits for the travel industry. At the end of today's presentation, she'll be sharing information and slides on some upcoming tours available through the UCLA Alumni Travel Department, so be sure to stay tuned. Our guest speaker today is Catherine Ham. She recently retired as travel editor of the LA Times, where she worked for more than 2 decades. She's a past president of the Society of American Travel Writers and current president of the Society's foundation. Other stops on her journey include editor of the Californian in Salinas, city editor and managing editor of the San Bernardino County Sun, deputy managing editor and travel editor at the Kansas City Star, and reporter at the Johnson County Sun in Kansas. Now she's a special contributor to the LA Times, and you can often find her valuable and humorous travel advice in their Saturday edition. She counts New York, Virginia, Hawaii, the Philippines, Kansas, Missouri, and California among the places she has called home, which she thinks should always include a cat. So please join me in welcoming Catherine Ham and Crystal Aragon.
Thank you so much, Robin. So what we thought we would do today is we prepared some questions that we think people would like to hear the answers to. And it's wonderful to see you again, Catherine. We've met many, many times over the years at the Educational Travel Conference back east. So it's wonderful to see you again. So should I start asking questions, Catherine? Is that okay? Or did you
ready when you are?
Okay.
Just don't ask me anything hard, okay?
All right. So do you have to have a negative COVID test to travel domestically?
The answer is mostly no. You do not have to have a negative COVID test largely for domestic travel. The exception, of course, is Hawaii. And I am unclear on the territories, so you might also check on the 5 territories. But for Hawaii, you do have to have a negative COVID test, and that will help you avoid being quarantined.
Yes, and I know from personal experience, I was there in October, they're very strict in Hawaii. So you want to make sure you arrive at that test and that you take it as far out as 72 hours before your flight as possible so that you get it back in time. So great. How about having a negative COVID test when you travel internationally?
A negative COVID test is usually acceptable. Some places do not require you to have a vaccine, but that doesn't hurt. But the negative COVID test seems to be the standard for most international travel.
Right. And there's a lot of talk about Europe opening up this summer. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, this changes daily, but where are we right now?
It is like trying to nail Jello to a tree. Honestly, it is. I mean, I read this stuff every day, and I still am just befuddled by what is open, what is not open, and why. Greece is supposed to open this month, and others are beginning to open up. Earlier, I thought I had read that the UK was relaxing its restrictions, but that is not true. The State Department is relaxing its advice on whether the UK is safe to travel. The State Department has a warning system that is 4 levels, and 4th level is please don't go, which is where the UK used to be. Now it's down to a 3. That doesn't mean the UK will let you in. It just means that our State Department objects less to your going if you can get in. From my perspective, the best way to find out the most current rules and regulations is through the embassy of the country you wish to visit. You can find all of those usually just by Googling and seeing where the embassy is, but you can also go to our State Department website, and it will give you a head start. It will give you basic travel information for non-COVID times, some travel information for COVID times, and it will also direct you to the embassy website. So that along with a call never hurts to that embassy number is probably your best bet at this time to get the most current information.
Great, thank you. And how about airline tickets? When should you book your airline tickets for summer or fall?
The best time to buy an airline ticket is when you see a fare that you like. And I have to confess that just seconds before we were getting on this call, I was looking at Google Flights, which is one of my go-tos for finding good fares for a flight to Seattle. I find their low fare calendar extremely useful. So airfares are going to be a little bit unpredictable because a lot depends on demand. We keep hearing about increased demand, and yet just in my survey just recently, fares have not gone up that much, and it sort of surprised me, but fares are fairly flat to Europe, and we are seeing some pretty good bargains. A couple of things I might recommend, and these services come in free versions and paid versions. There's a company called Moonfish. They're relatively new, and they specialize in helping people find low fares. They send daily alerts or as often as they can. And the other one is Scott's Cheap Flights, to which I do subscribe, and actually did find the fare that brought me home last night from Washington, D.C. Was a $170 round trip, and that was not basic economy. That was a regular main cabin fare. I don't believe I've ever paid that little flying to D.C., where I go fairly often because I have family there. So it's, I think all of these things together, the hunt for a good airfare is a little bit easier than it's been. Maybe not quite as critical as it has been in the past, but again, if you're a leisure traveler and you're price sensitive, and I am both of those things, it is important in keeping your costs in line.
Great, thank you. Now, what should you be aware of if you need to cancel, if you're not sure your travel plans?
You know, the rules have changed just since last week. We had a lot of clapping and shouting because basic economy, which is the lowest level of fare, during the first part of the pandemic, you could cancel basic economy fare and rebook, or you would not have any change fees, or you wouldn't lose the value of your fare. That increasingly is no longer true. I booked a basic fare to Seattle the week before this last one, and I thought, great, I can just cancel this whenever I want to and not suffer any consequences. That is also not true, not any longer. So you do need to pay attention to those restrictions, and you also need to pay attention to restrictions, particularly on international fares. And yes, as much as I hate to say this, read the fine print, because that's where you're going to find the answers to your questions. You may not like them, but they should be there. So be aware, basic economy no longer is a cancel and get your money back, or cancel and have your money held in trust. That is over. Most airlines are continuing to offer uh, changes without fees, which has been a thorn in everybody's side. And I hope that will continue. I think it will continue for a while. But the thing you need to be aware of is if the price of your new ticket is more than your original booking fee, you do have to pay the difference between those two. If it's less, some airlines will give you your money back, except United will not. Absolutely. It's heads, United wins, tails, United wins. So be aware of that as you're making reservations.
Thank you. So if you do travel abroad, how do you go about getting the negative COVID test to then get back into the States? That is currently a requirement.
There are many places that are offering the test. So the thing you have to be sure of is, are they requesting a PRC test, or will any test do? Many airports are now offering them. 2 blocks away from me, there's a 15 to 20 minute COVID test. So they're everywhere. Just make sure they're within the 72-hour window, and make sure that the airline or the country or the place you're visiting doesn't require a specific type of test. Make sure you've got the test that they will honor.
Great. And you need to check it and then check it again right before you leave, right? Because it could change between the time you booked the trip and left.
Yes.
And also I've heard that many hotels internationally will now offer this service to their guests, and they'll say they'll put you up in a room in case your test come back positive. So there's that assurance that I think travelers need right now. So.
Yes.
Okay, how about travel insurance? What does it cover?
Wow, how many hours do we have? This is the thing that's tricky about travel insurance, besides everything, is that travel insurance is not federally regulated. So travel insurance varies from state to state to state. For example, if I'm booking insurance and a friend is from New York is going with me, the restrictions that apply to her insurance are different from the restrictions that apply to my insurance. So that is something to always be aware of. I think insurance companies, because they got a bit of a black eye over COVID, are being much better about actually sitting down and discussing with you what some of the restrictions are. It's incredibly difficult to know unless you are an insurance expert every single bit of what is covered. And many people lost out when COVID struck, because it either was by the time their insurance was ready to be filed, it was either a known problem, or they simply were not covered, because very often pandemics are not covered. In fact, it's not unusual for that to be excluded. So people, I think, are bitter about travel insurance. I continue to be very pro travel insurance, simply because the investment that I make in my vacation, if it's significant, is not one that I want to lose. I want to have help recovering that. The easiest way to do that is to buy cancel for any reason insurance, which has changed again in the pandemic, but cancel for any reason insurance is exactly what it sounds like. It doesn't matter whether your cat has died, you've had water damage in your home, your car got towed, whatever it happens to be, you can cancel for any reason and get a significant part of your investment back. That's not it is not inexpensive. It is a little more expensive. It is quite a bit more expensive than regular travel insurance, and the payout had been 75%. There's been some discussion about lowering that, but it is still the only thing that will almost absolutely cover you in any circumstances. I think the issue with travel insurance is knowing what is not covered and trying to figure out the questions to ask to make sure that you are covered, because there, for example, there are exclusionary clauses in travel insurance that say things like, if your child plays sports and your child is injured while playing that sport and requires hospitalization and it makes your trip impossible, too bad, that's excluded. So you really need to know what those exclusions are and ask and ask and ask again and take great notes.
Yep. How about train travel?
Train travel, I think, is coming back. Rocky Mountaineer has added some trips I'm sorry, the Canadian Mountaineer has added trips in the US. Amtrak has been really good about social distancing, and they've been good about safety and hygiene. Their prices are obviously more expensive than flying, but are still pretty good. There are some routes that are still not back online, at least not at full capacity. So give Amtrak a call. They'll be thrilled to hear from you. They're always sort of the afterthought in travel, which is kind of too bad because it is such an incredibly relaxing way to travel, particularly in these times.
Absolutely. How about rental car prices? Is rental cars been in the news? Yeah,
Oh,
there's no inventory. They sold everything.
My head is gonna explode. I was telling Robin earlier, I'm planning to take a niece to Kauai for her birthday, and found a $393 round trip fare, and so that's good. And I found a nice Airbnb, and that's good. And then I priced the rental car, and the rental car for a week in a Chevy Spark. No aspersions against, I'm not throwing shade at Chevy Spark, but it's tiny. It's slightly larger than a bread box. So for a week in Kauai, the rental of that little tiny car is going to be $1,000. And I was not stunned, having read several stories and written one myself, about how rental car rates have gone up. The rental car companies had obviously a miserable time during the pandemic. They parked their cars. They were renting space to park their cars. They got rid of much of their inventory. And as a result of that, there are many fewer rental cars. There were about 4,000 cars destroyed in a fire down in Florida. And so they sold kind of at the beginning of the pandemic when used car rates were low. Well, then they shot way up. So they kind of missed that window. And now the chip crisis in automotive manufacturing, although that is largely in trucks, it is delaying the completion of some sedans. And so that is having an effect as well. So all in all, if it can get any worse, I'm not sure how, but given what we've gone through the last 14 months, I'm confident it can get worse.
Yeah.
I just hope it won't get worse.
It's almost like when you plan your vacation, you need to start with the car rental and then work backwards, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You should start with your car rental because, again, the farther out you book, the better price you will get. I just spent almost a full day looking actually for a story I was writing at prices. One of the ways in which rental car companies have been holding down prices, and this was true pre-pandemic as well, but it's even truer now, and that is pay in advance, because certainly they can use your money. They can use that money. Make sure you understand what cancellation penalties are and whether you can get all of that money back or you're going to get a voucher. Again, rental car companies are not as regulated as, say, airlines. So make sure you understand that fine print. And I hate fine print. Everybody hates fine print, but it is always worth your while, I think, to take a look and see.
Yeah. So what is it like to fly right now? What can you expect at the airports and on board?
Well,
you haven't flown in the last year.
I have flown twice in the last 2 weeks, once to Washington State, and last night I just got home from Washington, D.C. Very different trips. I flew on Delta before Delta decided that it was not going to keep the middle seat open. So I had a middle seat going up. I did not have a middle seat open coming back. Um, it was a perfectly fine flight. Everybody was cooperative. Everybody was masked. Flight attendants could not have been nicer. Delta is still boarding back to front, for which I applaud them. My other flight was a round trip on Alaska to DC. And I think I mentioned my Delta ticket was a basic economy, but there was nothing, I didn't suffer at the hands of that, just simply because most planes are not yet at full capacity. So it was a pretty easy flight. The Alaska flight was fine. It was long. I don't remember being that restless, but then I haven't flown in 14 months either. It came with the requisite crying baby for 2,200 miles. It came with the requisite scrum when the flight lands and everybody wants to rush off. Delta did not do that. Delta made people sit down and not move. Um, and, I really couldn't have been happier, because it seems so normal. And so much of what's happened in the last year in travel has been abnormal, has been inconceivable. And to have something feel that normal, with the possible exception of having a semi-sweaty face mask, uh, was really, it was really nice. And I'm not sure that I won't get to the point where I say, oh God, I can't get on another flight. But I think it'll be a while, because just the sense of being able to go and see, the question that I just was writing is there ever too much hugging with your family? And the answer to that is, after 2 years apart, the answer is no. I just, it, it was unbelievably great. So, I mean, we'll be fighting again in like a couple of months, but for right now, everybody is happy, and I was too. I ended up taking a small side trip from Washington, D.C. to Chestertown, Maryland. I grew up in the Virginia, Maryland area, and it was beautiful, and it was spring. I think there is no place like it. And just to breathe in that air, and to feel, spring feels different in the East Coast than it does the West Coast. And it's very soft air, and to hear the patter of rain against the windows at nighttime, which we don't hear very often here, was so lovely. And the azaleas were blooming, and it was lovely. And it reminded me of what is possible, and how much we sometimes forget to appreciate the things that are actually maybe the greatest gift, which is nature, the outdoors, and seeing other people, hearing other accents, definitely hearing other accents. So,
Yeah. Well, great. Well, how about at the airports or parking? Are there any changes that we need to be aware of there? Or
well, at the risk of tipping my hand on the next story I'm writing for the Los Angeles Times, my flight to DC was an early morning flight. I went to my go-to parking lot, which is Lot E. That's the old Lot C that was repurposed. I got there about 5:30, I think. When we're zipping up to the parking lot, and it's closed. And I have not read that in the LA Times or anywhere else. And it said, well, you can always park at the airport. Yes, and I can also take out a second mortgage on my home if I do that. So I scrambled around, and I ended up parking at my old go-to place, which is the parking spot on Century Boulevard. There's also one in Sepulveda. Most of the private lots and hotel lots are open, but I would recommend that you call first. Many of them before the pandemic were already asking you to make reservations, and that's always a good idea. So make sure that you check out the place that you want to park. I tend to be a creature of habit, and if this place works, then I'm going to use it, and the service is good, I'm going to use it. I did not check on Lot E, and my tab for parking there was actually just $37 less than my round trip ticket to DC. So lesson learned, hard lesson to learn, but I will make sure that I understand what I don't know and try to check on it.
Great, thank you. We have some questions from the audience. So one is, how safe it is to stay in hotels as far as air circulation is concerned?
Hotels do not have filtration systems that are as good as airlines. Airlines have HEPA filters that do a good job. Hotels are not going back and retrofitting. How concerned should you be about that? If you're vaccinated, probably not all that concerned. I think we might feel a little bit easier now staying in a hotel. I do know that hotels have amazing cleaning protocols, and they are strict, strict, strict. Many of them will put a little seal on your door as they're leaving that says no person has been in here since 72 hours. They're pretty good. Hotels are pretty good about keeping space between rooms because, again, they're not at full occupancy. They're very good about making sure that, it used to be that cleaning people would appear only at night in the common areas of hotels. The idea was that you were not supposed to see them. Well, nowadays, hotels want you to see them because they want you to feel more comfortable. So you'll see probably more cleaning people. You'll see lobbies rearranged. You may not get the old free breakfast that you used to get, or you may get it in a box, but they are doing their utmost because, of course, like airlines, they were hit tremendously, tremendously hard, and they are going to do everything they can to earn your business, which means that you need to have confidence in them.
Absolutely. So how about someone's asking, they're going to Hawaii this summer and they are fully vaccinated. Will that be okay? Will they see the negative COVID?
As of today, you still need that negative COVID test. And it is pretty easy to do that. You go to, I don't think they call them preferred providers, but providers that are hooked up with the state system. It's relatively easy. It's fairly electronic. You do that 72 hours before your flight, and you can avoid the I think it's the 10-day quarantine that you would otherwise have to do. Hawaii has been strict about that quarantine for obvious reasons. And there is, for people who defy that quarantine, there is a $5,000 fine and a possible 1 year in jail if they catch you out in public and you're supposed to be quarantining. A lot of people were caught early on in this process because they kept posting to social media, oh, we're going to blah, 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 or we just went to this place, or we're going to, wherever. And the feds were pretty unhappy about that. And so it wasn't the feds, it was the state. And so they did track them down and slap them with a big fat fine. And a year in Hawaii doesn't sound bad to me, but a year in jail in Hawaii, not my favorite way to vacation. So I'm pretty much a rule follower, and I'll make sure that I do not break their rules. And it's also important because the islands have been devastated, as many tourism dependent places have been. And they've hung in there and they've done everything they can to ensure not only the safety of their travelers, but the safety of the people who live there. And you have to respect that. You absolutely do.
Absolutely. How about cruising? How do you feel about safety while cruising?
Well, I'm not sure. There seems to be a bit of a spat between Florida and some of the cruise lines, as you may have read. Governor DeSantis of Florida is not necessarily keen on making people have a vaccine before they can get on a cruise ship. And so there are cruise companies that are fussing with Governor DeSantis, and that will somehow resolve itself because cruising is too important to the economies of places like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Corpus Christi, places like that. I think that will somehow get resolved. The issue, of course, is that Most cruise lines are foreign flagged. They are not US flagged. And so on the other hand, it's sort of like if you have the bat and the ball, it's your game. So those are our US ports. So you either comply or you don't comply. I have seen a number of cruise lines that have said that you may board if you are fully vaccinated, and only if you are fully vaccinated. So I think it's a good idea to have a long discussion, either with your travel agent, and I'm still someone who believes in using a travel agent, particularly in uncertain times, or with the cruise line if you're booking directly with the cruise line. I think having a travel agent in these times has never been as important. I spoke with many agents during the pandemic, and of course their business bottomed out, but what they spent their time doing was trying to advocate for their passengers, for their clients. So that is something to keep in mind as you begin making plans.
Yeah, for sure. Catherine, what are your favorite top 3 domestic destination and top 3 international destinations?
Oh gosh, that is like saying, who's your favorite
I
child?
know, I get the
Uh,
question.
I actually just wrote an essay for a magazine, and I will tell you which one it was in a second, about what my favorite one of my favorite domestic places is. And I said, the LA Times used to have the travel show or travel show as part of the Festival of Books. And I got this question, what's your favorite place? And I told them what it was, and they practically booed me off the stage. I mean, I think they were ready to call in psychiatric social workers, but I have spent a significant amount of time in the Midwest, and I love Kansas. It is where my grandparents homesteaded a farm in 1904. It is where most of my family is from. I'm not from there. My sisters are not from there, but uh, it is it's an unexpected place. It is a very quiet place. It is a very liberating place. Now, having said that, I will also say that Hawaii, because I'm a former resident there, I got married there, has a very, very big place in my heart. And I also love Virginia, where I just was, Virginia, Maryland, again, because familiarity. But there's not a state I wouldn't go to given the chance. Um, again, North Dakota and Vermont. I need only those two to bag my 50. So I'm thinking Teddy Roosevelt State Park, National Park, that's a national park in North Dakota, and just Vermont because it's Vermont. And maybe I will be done with my 50.
Sounds like a plan. You do Vermont this fall. Yeah.
Yep.
How about internationally?
Internationally, I am, of course, extremely fond of the places most people are fond of. I love the UK. I would go, I love the UK and the Republic of Ireland. I would go back to in a heartbeat. That's my mother's homeland. And so that's always at the top. I have very fond memories of Costa Rica, where I have been a couple of times. Really, really enjoyed that. And I would go anywhere in South America if I could. I have much more travel to do in South America than maybe other places. So I really liked to. I, I think it was Robin was talking about a trip to Machu Picchu, and I'm going, yes, please, I'll do that again. Just love, love, love any place in South America.
Right. So how about the vaccination passports? What's the latest on that? It's in the news constantly.
Again, yeah. Again, it's a little bit like trying to nail Jello to the tree. I have been wonderfully surprised. I will say this. LA County, which is where I had my vaccination, I received a digital copy of that vaccination, which I keep in my Apple Wallet. And it's a wonderful thing to have. The cards that everybody got when they got vaccinated, those are fine, but mine was blank. So I could have written in there Wilma McGillicuddy and they wouldn't have known, nobody would have known the difference. They're not as secure. Having the digital health the digital passport they try to call them health passports or vaccine passports, has been much more controversial than I thought it would be. Um, and part of the reason I'm surprised by that, although perhaps I shouldn't be, is when I was a kid, my dad was working overseas, and we had to have the yellow card. We had to have the yellow fever card. And I can remember him placing it in my hands as we were going through customs and saying, don't lose this. If you lose this, you will never be able to go home. And I think secretly he might have been hoping for that, because, you know, I was kind of a Nelson child. That aside, um, it, the issue of privacy is of more concern in the digital age, and I understand that. However, this request for vaccination records is not new, and it has implications not only for you, but for the country you're visiting. Is it an unreasonable request? Greater heads than mine will debate this and come up with a solution. And it's not for me to say yes or no. I just know that it would not be my first time at that rodeo. Would I have concern about my information getting out there? Yeah, if somebody needs the information from a beyond middle-aged old lady, be my guest. If that's how you get your thrill, okay. She's been vaccinated. I don't know what else they can do with it. I'm sure there's something nefarious, but I don't know what it is. So I personally do not object, but maybe I'm a little bit less sensitive than I should be about privacy.
Thank you. And then how about cleanliness for Airbnb and other vacation rentals? Should we be concerned, or?
Airbnb came out very early in the pandemic and made it clear that there are going to be that there's categories of super cleanly people, you know, just as there are super hosts, there are super cleanly people. They've been very upfront about their rules and their regulations, and it is definitely important to read them and to make sure you know what you're booking and what the standards of that host are. I am less sure about VRBO and some of the others, simply because I haven't studied them. That's not to say that they're not perfectly fine, but again, it's worth investigating to make sure that those standards meet your standards and beyond. Because it is a matter of your health, and it is a matter of the health of the people who follow you. So again, asking lots of questions, even though they are difficult, even though they are pointed, I think ultimately is your BFF for travel in the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. And how about when you're cruising, if you get on a cruise ship, how are they going to deal with the infamous buffets? Is that a thing of the past?
I think you can pretty much kiss the buffet goodbye for now, which for those of us who need to watch our waistline, that's probably a blessing. And I think that cruise lines actually have had a preview of pandemic conditions, because norovirus has been, while it's not as obviously as serious as the coronavirus, norovirus has been a problem for cruisers for years. Norovirus is the fast-moving, highly contagious virus that causes vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, fever, and can be especially problematic for older people. Of course, many cruise lines do cater to the older traveler and to babies. And so they have had to deal with this for years. They're very, very aware of the problems with high touch surfaces like stair railings and buffets. And they have taken precautions before pandemic, sometimes closing down the buffets. Now with the pandemic, I think they're going to be super cautious. I believe that the cruise lines paid a steep price in the pandemic and got a real black eye for some of the things that did or did not happen. And while we never want any travel provider to put our lives in jeopardy, I think the fact of the matter is that at the beginning, we just did not know. And I think in some cases, there was an underreaction. I know I personally underreacted. I kept thinking, well, why can't I work in the office? You know, these are my mates, I know them. I think the underreaction was created many problems, some of them real and some of them public relations related. And I think they're going to do everything they can to make sure that they provide the best experience possible so that they never, ever have a rerun of this.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So last question we have here. What right now are the 3 safest countries to travel to if you had to pick 3 right now?
If I had to pick 3,
Mhm.
that is a really, really good question. I think if I were going to answer this question, and I feel a little nervous about answering it, I would first look up and see, I would go to the CDC site and see what I could find out from there. I would look at the State Department site because, of course, the question is the same question we've been asking for years, and it is it safe there? But previously, the question related to terrorism and crime, and now it relates to something else altogether. And so this is another area of study that we as travelers have as a responsibility, or depending on how you see it, as a privilege, to investigate before we make our final booking. Because the ultimate thing is you want to feel comfortable where you're traveling. You want to make sure that it meets your needs. A a dead client is not a good client. And I think travel agents know that and will be equally cautious. Again, this is their knowledge and expertise is one reason I continue to be a fan of travel agents. And so I am guessing that places like Costa Rica, which again is allowing Americans in, will have been very cautious. I don't have firsthand knowledge of that. That is what I have read. Any place that is opening up and looks like its regulations and rules are strict and strict enough to contain any variance, if we can do that, I would certainly ask the CDC, and I would follow that to the ends of the earth, so to speak, to make sure that nobody is booking a trip to India right now. But are there other Indias that we just haven't heard about? I don't know, but get some help, whether it's from the State Department, a travel agent, or somebody who is boots on the ground.
Thank you. All right. So Robin had asked me to share a little bit about UCLA Alumni Travel, kind of what we're up to. And we're busy again, which is fantastic after a year of being pretty quiet or dealing with vouchers and postponements. So Justin, if you would like to start the little PowerPoint I put together, I'll share some information with you. Here we go. All right. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about 2021. For those of you that are itching to get out there and want to do something this year, these are 4 destinations that I feel good about happening this year. So the first one is Alaska. So this is a small ship cruise. So for those of you that haven't been to Alaska, it's a domestic trip, but it almost feels like you're traveling to another country. It's so breathtaking and beautiful. And this ship is only 76 travelers, and everyone have to be fully vaccinated to take this vacation. You get real close to wildlife. I've done this trip myself. If there's whales up there, the ships will just kind of maneuver over there. You do a lot of sightseeing with zodiacs. You do kayaking. And also we have a UCLA professor on this trip, Professor Paul Barber. If cruising is not your thing, we also have an Alaska land tour early August, August 1st through the 8th. And the next one is Iceland. And Iceland has actually been open since April 6th for fully vaccinated travelers. I visited back in 2018 and absolutely fell in love with this country and its people. Just incredible waterfalls and bubbling mud pools and lots of nature and open spaces. The birds that you see there, those are the puffins, or the clowns of the sea, as they're called. And our first departure early August is already sold out. So we're selling this second departure right now, August 7th through the 15th. The next one is Portugal. And even though Europe hasn't quite opened up for American travelers yet. It looks like it's going to happen, and this is a fall tour. So this is also on a small river cruise ship, just over 100 travelers, but you start your trip with 3 days in the beautiful city of Lisbon, and then you travel up to Porto, where you board your ship and cruise the Douro River, which is a much smaller river, much quaint and quieter than the Danube and the Rhine. This is a very popular trip that we've offered over the last couple of years. Then we have the Galapagos Islands, and it's a fantastic destination. And it's one of those that if you haven't been, you should definitely put it on your to-do list at some point in your life. As you know, it's the small islands off the coast of Ecuador. And we do this trip with Lindblad Expedition that have, they've been down there since the late 60s. They were the first cruise company down there. Now they operate 3 cruise ships in the area for 11 months out of the year. And like Alaska, you do a lot of the sightseeing by zodiacs and kayaking and hiking and just getting really, really close to all the wonderful wildlife down there, which, you know, the animals aren't afraid of you. So it's like you're walking around in a zoo. It's a fantastic experience. We are going to have an information session about Galapagos on May 26th at 5 p.m. If you're interested in joining, just let me know, and I'll be happy to send you the information how to join that session. It's also on Zoom. All right, so then let's talk about 2022. Well, first of all, if you haven't been on our website for a while, we have all our 62 tours up. So boil yourself a big cup of tea or coffee and take some time and just sit, and if nothing else, just to dream and look forward to. The first one is New Zealand. And we do have a trip to New Zealand this fall, but I'm not too optimistic that it will happen. New Zealand is one of those countries that have been very, very strict with who they let in. They've created this bubble, which is, of course, is a lot easier to do when you're an island. But they are saying right now, at least, that they will open up to vaccinated travelers come early next year for sure. Obviously, it's a safe and beautiful destination. This trip is actually 16 days. And it features both the North and South Islands. You'll spend 3 days in Queenstown, which is one of my all-time favorite cities in the world. It's known as the adventure capital of the world. Next, we have Tanzania. And even though Africa right now, I wouldn't recommend it for this year. They're really behind when it comes to vaccinating their population. But obviously, at some point, they will catch up. And because Africa has not many people have visited over the last year, you can get it at a really good price right now. Our Tanzania trip and also Kenya trip are selling for under $5,000. And these are luxurious, you know, camps and wonderful sightseeing, small tour groups. And usually these tours are at least $2,000 more. So it's a good time to grab Africa for 2022 if you think you wanted to do that. We also have other Africa tours to South Africa and also the Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana area. The next one I want to mention is Israel. And obviously right now with the news, there's unrest there. This trip is 10 months away, but it is a wonderful destination to visit. Lots of rich history. All the people in Israel, they have reached, you know, herd immunity. They've done really well with their vaccinations. And this comprehensive trip features Tel Aviv, the Sea of Galilee, Jerusalem, Masada, and the Dead Sea. It also features a UCLA professor, Aaron Burke, from Near Eastern Languages and Cultures. And it has a 4-day, 3-night extension to Jordan, the lower picture there. I'm standing in front of the treasury in Petra. So definitely do that if you do this trip. And then the last trip I wanted to mention is Antarctica. Now this is 2023, and the reason why I put this up is because we're not sure 2022 can happen. Argentina obviously have to open up their borders so that we can board the ship in Ushuaia. So that's a little iffy. But in January of 2023, Professor Andrea Guest, who just received the Nobel Prize in Physics, will be joining us. She joined us back in 2018 and loved the trip so much that she's going back. And I always feel when I go down there, you're really, it's almost like in a different planet. It's so beautiful, so much nature, so many penguins. And it's not that cold. That's usually a question that I get. So, but it does take some planning. There's limited ships that go down there. So if Antarctica is on your bucket list, I would highly recommend that you consider joining us on one of our future trips in January every year. And last but not least, you can, our website is up there, travel.alumni.ucla.edu. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I also put my phone number there, and hope to see you on one of our tours in the future. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Crystal. And I also want to mention that you don't have to be an alum of UCLA to join one of your trips, right?
That's
it's open
correct.
to the public.
Friends
Great.
and family can join.
Good. Great. Good news. What about kids? Do you have many children attend?
Not many, but we do have children. And that's one thing that we're seeing now is that people want to travel together. Families want to travel together. So we have grandparents taking their children and grandchildren and, you know, booking 8 spaces on a trip or 10 spaces. And that's wonderful to see. So we're seeing a lot of that happening now. Yes.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing your trips with us, trip tips, I should say, with us. Crystal, we really appreciate having you on board to moderate. I think each of us, we're all looking forward to taking a vacation this summer and exploring and connecting with other people. And maybe we'll even meet some fellow Bruins on one of Crystal's tours. This is our last meeting for Town and Gown for the school year, and we'll be planning a series of interesting speakers for next year, starting in September. Thank you, Town and Gown affiliates, for attending this afternoon on Zoom, and I hope you all have a great summer and safe travels, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. I also wanted to say to everyone, I will send an email out to everyone who attended today. Probably later, sometime later today, with just some more info about the affiliates and how you can join, and also all the great travel information that Crystal just shared, how you can contact her and get more info about the trips. And also, if you had any questions for Catherine that were unanswered, I'll let you know who you can direct those to as well. So I'll be sending that out later today. But yeah. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. And Robin, Crystal, Catherine, everyone else in the affiliates, thank you for such a great program and for all your time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you.